Joining us now with reaction, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Miranda Devine, and Project 21 Chairman Horace Cooper. Professor, let's start with you. This has got to get under your skin. This is very personal. You spent a lot of time at Harvard, and they have lost their way, my friend.
60 years at Harvard, and they're being let off easily. It's not that they tolerated anti-Semitism. They taught it. They taught it in the divinity school. They taught it in the public health school. That's the conclusion that the Harvard report reached. This man who killed these two wonderful young people was stimulated, incited by what is being taught at places like Harvard and Columbia. And there's blood on the hands of professors and students who are calling for a globalized intifada. What does a globalized intifada mean? The actual intifada, 4,000 innocent people were killed. They were blown up in buses and pizza parlors. And when people say globalize the intifada, what they're saying is kill Jews. And that's coming from Harvard, that's coming from Columbia, and it has to stop. And cutting off funds, look, in 1935, Harvard was admitting Nazi students, Nazi faculty. They were sending faculty over to German universities. Wouldn't every liberal have been thrilled if the visas had been cut off from the Nazi students and if funding had been cut off? Well, you can't distinguish between that and what's going on today on college campuses. What's going on today on college campuses is what the Klan did in 1955 when they intimidated black students on campus. Now that the shoe is on the other foot and the victims of all this violence and discrimination are Jews, liberals can't simply say, oh my God, it's a matter of academic freedom. If it wasn't a matter of academic freedom in 1935 and 1955, then surely universities have an obligation not to foment and incentivize the kind of killings that we're going to see, and it's going to get worse. I have to go now and get security guards. I have been told by law enforcement officials that I am not safe because I am a highly visible pro-Israel supporter, and I have a target on my back, as do many other pro-Israel supporters.
And Miranda, that's part of the problem, exactly what the professor is talking about. I mean, to have people gunned down there in Washington, D.C., people that are working at an embassy, young people, innocent people. I mean, these are the allegations. We'll see if they're true, but that's the allegation. But we've seen all this rhetoric, and then suddenly people act on it, and then everybody acts surprised, at least on the left.
Yes, Jason, look, it's just shocking to hear that Professor Dershowitz is being told that he has to hire security guards to protect himself because he is a high-profile Jew in America. That is simply terrible. And, I mean, this terrorist, this anti-Semitic terrorist who murdered in cold blood Yaron and Sarah, two beautiful young people, one Jewish, one Christian, who represented everything that's good about those two religions. And you know, the police report shows that this murderer went after Sarah. First of all, he shot them in the back, and then when Sarah was crawling, still alive, trying to get away, he went and shot her several times more to make sure she was dead. And he did this in a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. It wasn't an Israeli museum. It wasn't a political place. It was a museum dedicated to celebrating the stories of Jewish people in Washington, people like the late Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg. There were oral histories of Holocaust survivors. This was an attack on the Jewish people. And to try and dress it up in some sort of political fashion, no. This is naked anti-Semitism, and this killer was marinating in it among his peers, these far-left anti-Semites who are really in bed with the Islamists.
So, Horace, wrap this together for us, because what I see is Tim Walz, right, the former Democratic vice presidential nominee, going out there and comparing ICE officers to the Gestapo of everybody. I mean, come on. And then they have these riots and these calls for death to Jews, the Intifada. It all ties together, and then the left just feigns and you can't seem to find a Chuck Schumer or somebody else out there who is vehemently out there pounding the pavement saying this will not stand. I just don't see that. So what in the world is going on, Horace?
The evil of anti-Semitism is just going to have to be pulled root and branch out of our country, our system. We can't allow people to come to this country that are going to foment it, and we're going to have to say to our universities that they can't act to encourage it. I would encourage local churches to reach out to Jewish communities in their areas so that people can see and understand and better appreciate the great values and the great people that so many of the Jews are. Now, I just want to turn real quick, though, to the New York Times feeling like it's their job to lament the downside of the abuses of these radical, evil people. Could you imagine during Jim Crow when the military wing of the Democrats called the Ku Klux Klan had been caught bombing, had been caught hanging, had been caught engaging in dangerous, life-threatening activities? Could you imagine the New York Times saying, well, now, what is this going to do to the arguments about federalism? What is this going to do about the arguments about states' rights? What America did then is what America has to do today. We must come together and stamp this evil out. We must not give it space. We must not give it breath.
Right. That's right. They got to prosecute everybody who gets even close to this and steps over the line. They got to deport the people that are here illegally or breaking the laws. And we got to do this. And I don't think we can continue to fund at those high levels. Very quick last word, Professor Dershowitz.
We have to know that these kinds of riots on college campuses inevitably lead to shootings and killings. I just published a new book called The Preventive State, in which I actually predicted, based on my experience in representing protesters in the 1970s, I predicted that these violent protesters on Harvard's campus and others would inevitably lead to people bombing, shooting, and doing other kinds of things the way it did in the 60s. So every one of us, Jew and non-Jew, is at risk if we don't stop these violent demonstrations and these calls for intifada.
Absolutely. Professor Dershowitz, Miranda, Horace, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.